Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily English Lab podcast. I spent 10 years learning English the wrong way. 10 years. Thousands of hours studying grammar rules, memorizing vocabulary lists, completing workbook exercises. I could pass any written test you gave me. But when I tried to have a real conversation, I froze. I sounded awkward. Native speakers looked confused when I spoke. Then I discovered something that changed everything. I was learning English the way schools teach it, not the way native speakers actually use it. And here's the shocking part. 95% of English learners are making the exact same mistakes I made. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to show you the 5 critical mistakes that wasted years of my life and how you can avoid every single one of them. If you've been studying English for years but still don't feel confident speaking, this video might completely change your approach. Let's make sure you don't waste another day learning English the wrong way. Hey everyone, I'm your English coach, and my mission is to help you learn English the way it's actually used, not the way it's taught in textbooks. And trust me, those are two very different things. So let me tell you my story real quick. I started learning English in school when I was 12 years old. My teachers were excellent. The curriculum was comprehensive. I studied diligently, got top grades, won English competitions. By the time I was 22, I had a decade of English education under my belt. I should have been fluent, right? Wrong. When I moved to an English-speaking country, I struggled constantly. I couldn't understand casual conversations. I couldn't express my thoughts naturally. I felt like all those years of study had prepared me for an English exam, not for real life. That's when I realized I had learned English wrong. Here's why this matters to you. Traditional English education focuses on grammar rules, vocabulary lists, reading comprehension, and written tests. But real English, the English you need for jobs, relationships, travel, and daily life, requires completely different skills that most courses never teach. Today, I'm going to reveal the 5 biggest mistakes I made, mistakes that cost me years of progress. First, we'll talk about studying grammar instead of using grammar in real communication. Second, learning isolated words instead of phrases. Third, focusing on understanding instead of producing. Fourth, translating in your head instead of thinking in English. And fifth, avoiding mistakes instead of embracing them. By the end of this video, you'll have a completely new approach to learning English, one that actually works for real-world communication. And the best part? You can start implementing these changes today. Before we dive in, I need to know, what's the biggest frustration in your English learning journey right now? Comment below and let me know. Are you stuck at the same level for years? Can't understand native speakers? Afraid to speak? Tell me, because I genuinely want to help you break through whatever's holding you back. And if you're serious about learning English the right way, hit that subscribe button and tap the like button. I create videos like this every week to help you avoid the mistakes I made. Trust me, your future self will thank you. All right, let's get into these 5 game-changing mistakes. Mistake number 1 is the one that trapped me for the longest time. Studying grammar rules instead of actually using grammar in real communication. I spent years memorizing tenses, learning the difference between present perfect and past simple, understanding conditional sentences. I could explain grammar rules better than some teachers, but I couldn't use them naturally in conversation. Here's the thing about grammar. Native speakers don't consciously think about grammar rules when they speak. They just know what sounds right because they've used those patterns thousands of times. But when you only study grammar, you create a mental database of rules without building the automatic patterns your brain needs for fluent speech. It's like studying music theory for 10 years without ever playing an instrument. You understand the concepts, but you can't make music. Most learners fall into 3 grammar traps. First, they spend hours reading grammar explanations and doing fill-in-the-blank exercises without ever speaking. Second, they try to remember rules while speaking, which creates painfully slow, hesitant speech. Third, they think accuracy is more important than communication, so they stay silent rather than risk making mistakes. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you're learning the present perfect tense. The traditional approach? You study the rule, use present perfect for actions that started in the past and continue to the present, or for experiences in your life. You do exercises. I blank lived here for 5 years. Answer: have lived. But in real conversation, you need instant access to patterns like, I've been working on this project for 3 months. Have you ever tried sushi? She's visited Japan twice. We haven't seen each other in ages. Notice the difference? The textbook teaches you the rule. Real life requires you to produce complete, natural sentences automatically without thinking about the rule. Here's another example. Past tense. Textbook way. Add ed to regular verbs. Memorize irregular verb lists. Real life way? Tell a story about your weekend using past tense naturally. So, yesterday, I woke up late, grabbed some coffee, and decided to go for a walk. I ran into my old friend Sarah. We hadn't seen each other since high school. We ended up talking for 2 hours. See how different those are? One is about rules. The other is about communication. Here's what I want you to do right now. Stop thinking about grammar as rules to memorize. Instead, pick one grammar structure you've been studying. Now, tell a 30-second personal story using that structure multiple times. Not exercises, not translations, a real story from your life. Record yourself doing this. Don't worry about mistakes. Just focus on using the grammar to communicate something meaningful. This is how you build real fluency. Remember this phrase, use it or lose it. Grammar isn't about knowledge, it's about skill. You can't build a skill by only reading about it. You build skills through repeated use in meaningful contexts. Think of grammar like riding a bike. Reading about balance and pedaling doesn't make you a cyclist. Getting on the bike and practicing does. I'll never forget my first week working in an English-speaking office. I had to give a presentation. I spent hours making sure my grammar was perfect. I wrote everything out, checked every sentence 3 times. During the presentation, I was so focused on not making grammar mistakes that I sounded like a robot reading a script. After the meeting, my colleague said, you can relax and just talk to us normally. That comment hit hard. I realized my obsession with perfect grammar was actually preventing real communication. Quick question for you. Do you find yourself mentally checking grammar rules while trying to speak? Does it slow you down and make you hesitant? Drop a comment and let me know. I want to understand how many of you are dealing with this exact issue. Okay, so studying grammar was my first big mistake, but my second mistake might be even more common, and it's costing you more time than you realize. It's about how you learn vocabulary, and I guarantee you're probably doing it the wrong way right now. Mistake number 2, learning individual words instead of learning phrases and collocations. I used to carry a vocabulary notebook everywhere. Every time I found a new word, I'd write it down with the translation. I'd review these lists constantly. I memorized thousands of words, but I couldn't use them naturally in sentences. Native speakers don't think in individual words. They think in chunks, in phrases, in combinations of words that naturally go together. When you only learn isolated words, you know what they mean, but you don't know how to use them. You end up creating sentences that are grammatically correct, but sound unnatural because you're combining words in ways that native speakers never would. Here's how most people learn vocabulary wrong. First, they translate word for word from their native language, leading to weird combinations. Second, they learn words without context, so they don't know which situations those words fit. Third, they ignore collocations, the natural word partnerships that make English sound fluent. Let me show you the difference. If you learn the word make and the word decision, you might logically think you can say do a decision, because in your language, that's the verb you use. But English speakers say make a decision, not do a decision. Here are more examples of collocations that don't translate logically. We say take a shower, not make a shower or do a shower. We say heavy rain, not strong rain or big rain. We say fast food, not quick food. We say make a mistake, not do a mistake. We say catch a cold, not take a cold or get a cold. Actually, get a cold works too, but catch a cold is more common. Now, let's look at phrases. Instead of learning tired, learn the whole phrase, I'm exhausted, I'm wiped out, I'm beat, I'm running on empty. Instead of learning happy, learn I'm over the moon. I'm thrilled. I'm on cloud nine. I'm pumped. See the difference? When you learn phrases, you learn how words actually combine in natural English. You sound like a native speaker because you're using the same patterns native speakers use. Here's a practical example. Bad way, learn the word responsibility. Good way, learn the phrases take responsibility, have a responsibility, shoulder the responsibility, avoid responsibility, sense of responsibility. Here's your action step. Go to your vocabulary list or vocabulary app right now. Pick 5 words you recently learned. For each word, don't just review the meaning. Instead, look up 3 common phrases or collocations using that word. Write example sentences. Say them out loud. This transforms passive vocabulary knowledge into active speaking ability. Here's how to remember this. Words are like individual puzzle pieces. They don't mean much alone. Phrases are like completed sections of the puzzle. They show you the full picture. Never learn a word by itself. Always learn it inside a phrase, inside a sentence, inside a context. This is called chunking, and it's how your brain naturally processes language. This mistake caused me serious embarrassment once. I was at a business dinner, and I wanted to say the food was really good. I knew the word delicious, but I tried to be creative. In my language, we say the equivalent of the food has much taste. So I said, this food has a lot of taste. Everyone paused. Someone kindly said, do you mean it's very tasty or flavorful? I learned that day that you can't just translate phrases word by word. You need to learn how English speakers actually express ideas, not how your language expresses them. Tell me in the comments, have you ever directly translated a phrase from your native language into English and gotten confused reactions? I bet you have. Share your funny or embarrassing story. Let's learn from each other's mistakes. Plus, it makes us all feel less alone in this learning journey. So we've covered 2 major mistakes, studying grammar instead of using it and learning words instead of phrases. But my 3rd mistake might surprise you because most teachers actually encourage this mistake. It's about focusing on the wrong skill entirely, and it's probably holding back your progress right now. Mistake number 3, spending all my time on passive skills, reading and listening, instead of active skills, speaking and writing. I consumed endless amounts of English content. I watched movies with subtitles, read books, listened to podcasts. I understood so much English, but I couldn't produce it. I was what you'd call a passive English user. Understanding English and producing English use different parts of your brain. When you only consume content, you're training your recognition system. You can recognize words and grammar when you see or hear them, but recognition doesn't automatically translate into production. Your brain needs separate practice to retrieve words quickly, form sentences spontaneously, and express thoughts fluently. Most learners make these passive learning mistakes. First, they spend 90% of study time consuming content and only 10% producing. Second, they believe that if they just consume enough English, speaking will magically happen. Third, they avoid production practice because it's harder and more uncomfortable than passively watching videos. Let me give you a clear comparison. Passive learning looks like this. You watch an English TV show with subtitles, you understand most of it, you feel like you're learning, you're comfortable. Active learning looks like this. You watch a scene from a show, then you pause it and try to retell what happened out loud in English without looking at the script. Or you describe the characters, predict what will happen next, or give your opinion about the scene. This is uncomfortable, this is hard, but this is what builds speaking ability. Here's another example. Passive. Reading an article about climate change and understanding all of the vocabulary. Active. After reading, closing the article and explaining the main points to someone else, or writing a summary, or recording yourself giving a 2-minute speech about the topic. One more. Passive, listening to a podcast about productivity tips. Active, listening to the podcast, then immediately using those phrases in your own sentences. The speaker mentioned that we should prioritize tasks. In my life, I need to prioritize my health over my work sometimes. The active version is always harder. It requires more mental energy, but it's the only way to transform passive knowledge into active ability. Try this right now. I just explained 3 mistakes in this video so far. Stop for a moment and try to explain those 3 mistakes out loud in your own words as if you're teaching someone else. Don't replay the video, just use your memory and your own English. Can you do it? This is active recall, and it's one of the most powerful learning techniques that exists. Seriously, pause and try this exercise. 30 seconds. Go. Think of language learning like learning to swim. You can watch Olympic swimmers for hours. You can read books about swimming techniques. You can understand everything about swimming. But until you get in the water and actually swim, you can't swim. English is the same. You need to get in the water. You need to produce English, even if it's messy at first. One of my students, Chin, was brilliant. He had an enormous vocabulary. He understood complex English texts. He watched English content for hours every day. But in our first conversation class, he barely spoke. He understood my questions but struggled to answer. I asked him, "How much time do you spend actually speaking English?" He said, "Almost none. I'm waiting until I'm ready." I told him, "You'll never feel ready until you start speaking." We shifted his entire study routine. For every hour of passive input, he did 30 minutes of active output. Within 3 months, his speaking transformed, not because he learned more English, but because he started using the English he already knew.
Here's my question for you. What percentage of your English study time is passive, reading, listening, watching, versus active, speaking, writing, producing? Be honest. Write your percentage in the comments. My guess? Most of you will say 80 to 90% passive, and that's exactly the problem we need to fix. All right, 3 mistakes down, but now we're getting into the deeper stuff. My 4th mistake is a mental habit that slows down your English so much you sound hesitant even when you know exactly what you want to say. It's happening in your brain right now, and you might not even realize it. Mistake number 4, translating everything from my native language instead of thinking directly in English. Every single time I wanted to say something, my brain would first formulate the sentence in my native language, then translate it word by word into English, then speak. This process took forever. By the time I finished translating in my head, the conversation had moved on. Translation creates a massive bottleneck in your fluency. First, it makes your speech incredibly slow. Second, it leads to unnatural English because you're using your native language's sentence structure and expressions. Third, it's mentally exhausting. Your brain is doing double work, processing 2 languages simultaneously. Fourth, it prevents you from ever achieving true fluency because fluency requires automatic, unconscious language production. Here are the translation mistakes everyone makes. First, they think this is the only way to produce English, that you have to translate. Second, they never practice the alternative, which is thinking directly in English. Third, they keep their native language too active in their mind, constantly comparing and translating instead of just living in English. Let me show you what translation thinking looks like versus direct English thinking. Translation thinking. You want to invite someone for coffee. In your mind, would you like to drink a coffee with me? You translate, would you like to drink a coffee with me? Direct English thinking. The English phrase just comes to you. Want to grab a coffee? Or feel like getting coffee? You're not translating. You're thinking in English patterns you've absorbed. Another example. Translation. You see rain and think in your language, then translate. It is doing rain. That's awkward because you translated literally. Direct English, you think it's raining because that's the English pattern you've internalized. One more. Translation. You want to express that something is expensive. Your language might say, this has a high price. You translate that. Awkward. Direct English, this is pricey. Or this costs a fortune. Or this is expensive. These phrases come to you directly without translation. The key difference is translation feels like work. Direct thinking feels natural and fast. Here's how you start thinking in English. For the next 24 hours, narrate your life in English inside your head. You wake up, I'm waking up. I'm still tired. I need coffee. You brush your teeth. I'm brushing my teeth. I need to buy more toothpaste. You cook breakfast. I'm making eggs. I should add some salt. Keep it simple. Use present continuous tense. Just describe what you're doing and thinking in simple English. Don't translate from your language. If you don't know a word, describe it in English or skip it. This exercise rewires your brain to default to English instead of translation. Here's the secret to thinking in English. Immerse your mind, not just your ears. Change your phone to English. Change your computer to English. Label objects in your house with English words. Follow English social media. Listen to English music. Watch English content without subtitles in your language. Create an English bubble around yourself. The more your brain lives in English, the less it needs to translate. You're essentially teaching your brain that English is the default language, not a foreign one. I remember the exact moment I realized I was thinking in English. I was grocery shopping, and I was mentally making my shopping list. Suddenly, I noticed I was thinking, I need milk, eggs, and bread, not in my native language, but in English. I didn't translate. The English just appeared in my mind. It was such a weird, amazing feeling. That's when I knew I was finally breaking free from the translation trap. It took about 6 months of consistent practice, but it happened. And it will happen for you too if you commit to this. I'm curious, have you ever caught yourself thinking in English without realizing it? Maybe during a dream or when you're distracted? Comment below and tell me about it. These little moments are signs you're making real progress, and I want to celebrate them with you. Okay, 4 mistakes revealed. But this last mistake, this is the one that keeps people stuck for years. It's a mindset issue that completely sabotages your learning, and almost every student I've ever worked with struggles with this. Let's talk about the fear of making mistakes.
Mistake number 5, and probably the most damaging, being terrified of making mistakes. So I avoided speaking unless I was absolutely certain my English was perfect. I would stay silent in group conversations. I would rehearse sentences in my head 5 times before saying them out loud. I would choose simple words I knew instead of trying new vocabulary. All because I was afraid of making mistakes and looking foolish. Here's the brutal truth. You cannot learn to speak English without making thousands of mistakes. Mistakes are not the enemy of learning. Mistakes are the pathway to learning. Every mistake teaches your brain something. Every mistake helps you refine your understanding. Every mistake makes you stronger. But when you avoid mistakes, you avoid opportunities to learn. You stay in your comfort zone using the same safe sentences, and you never grow. The fear of mistakes creates these problems. First, you severely limit your speaking practice because you're too anxious to try. Second, you focus on accuracy instead of fluency, which keeps you at a beginner level even after years of study. Third, you miss out on valuable feedback and correction because you're not producing enough language for people to correct. Fourth, you develop speaking anxiety that gets worse over time, not better. Let me show you 2 different approaches. Student A is afraid of mistakes. She wants to say, I went to the store yesterday, but it was closed, so I had to come back today. She's not sure about the grammar. She's worried about her pronunciation. So instead, she says nothing. She stays silent. She learns nothing. Student B embraces mistakes. He wants to say the same thing. He says, I go to store yesterday, but close, so I come back now. Lots of mistakes, right? But he communicated his idea. The other person understood. They might gently correct him. Oh, you went to the store, but it was closed. Now he's learned the past tense pattern in a real context. He's 1 step closer to fluency. Who's learning faster? Obviously, student B. Here's another example. You're at a restaurant. You want to ask where the bathroom is, but you're not sure if you should say bathroom, restroom, toilet, or washroom. Student A, afraid of mistakes, doesn't ask, and feels uncomfortable the entire meal. Student B just asks, "Where is the bathroom?" And maybe the waiter says, "restroom," in his response, teaching you the preferred term. Mistake made, lesson learned, life goes on. One more. You're giving an opinion in a meeting. You say, "I am thinking that we should to focus on marketing." You hear yourself, "That sounded wrong." "Should to? That's not right." But you said it anyway. Now your brain registers that mistake. Next time, you'll probably say "should focus" correctly. The mistake helped you learn. I want you to make a decision right now. For the next 7 days, give yourself permission to make mistakes. Actually, don't just permit them, actively seek them out. Try to use 10 new words or phrases this week, even if you're not sure you're using them correctly. Have conversations where you experiment with grammar structures you're learning. Record voice messages in English. Write comments in English. Make mistakes proudly, enthusiastically, fearlessly. This is how you break through plateaus. Remember this mantra: mistakes are not failures, they're feedback. Every time you catch yourself making a mistake, don't cringe or feel embarrassed. Instead, think, "Great, now I know what to improve." Reframe mistakes from something negative to something valuable. This mindset shift is powerful. Also, remember, native speakers make mistakes all the time. Seriously. Listen carefully to any native speaker, and you'll hear grammar mistakes, pronunciation slips, and verbal fumbles. Nobody speaks perfectly all the time. Perfection is not the goal. Communication is. I used to be paralyzed by perfectionism. I once spent 15 minutes at a coffee shop trying to decide how to ask for a latte without making a mistake. Should I say, "I would like," "I want," "can I get," "could I have"? I was so anxious that I almost left without ordering. Finally, I just blurted out, "1 latte, please." And you know what happened? The barista smiled, said, "Sure," and made my drink. That's when it hit me. Real people don't care about your grammar. They care about connection and communication. That day changed my entire approach to English. I started focusing on being understood rather than being perfect. My progress accelerated immediately. Final question for you. What's holding you back from speaking more English? Is it fear of mistakes? Fear of judgment? Perfectionism? Share it in the comments. Let's normalize the struggle so we can all move past it together. You're not alone in this fear, I promise. So there you have it. 5 mistakes that cost me 10 years of progress. But before we wrap up, I need to tell you about 3 things that will sabotage everything you just learned if you're not careful. Let's make sure you avoid these final pitfalls. Now that you know the 5 big mistakes, let me warn you about 3 things that will prevent you from actually fixing these mistakes. You just learned 5 game-changing insights. But here's the problem. Most people watch videos like this, feel motivated for 5 minutes, and then go right back to their old habits. They collect information but never implement it. Knowledge without action is useless. Don't let this video become just another piece of content you consumed and forgot. Pick 1 mistake from today's list, just 1. Commit to fixing it this week. Write it down. Schedule specific practice time. Actually do the work. You might be tempted to completely overhaul your English learning routine overnight. Don't. That's overwhelming and unsustainable. You'll burn out in 3 days and quit. Instead, focus on 1 mistake at a time. This week, maybe focus on using grammar instead of just studying it. Next week, start learning phrases instead of isolated words. Gradual, consistent change beats dramatic, temporary change every single time. Some of you are thinking, I need to find the perfect textbook, the perfect app, the perfect course that will fix all these problems. Stop. You don't need more resources. You need more practice. You don't need a better method. You need to actually use the method. The best approach is the one you'll actually stick to. Start now with what you have. Use free YouTube videos. Practice with language exchange partners. Talk to yourself in English. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Action beats planning every time. Remember, I wasted 10 years making these mistakes. You don't have to.
but only if you actually take what you learned today and apply it. Don't just be a consumer of English content, be a producer of English language. Let's quickly recap the 5 mistakes that wasted 10 years of my English learning journey so you can avoid them. Mistake number 1, studying grammar rules instead of using grammar in real communication. The fix: practice using grammar structures in meaningful contexts, not just filling in blanks in workbooks. Mistake number 2, learning isolated words instead of phrases and collocations. The fix: always learn words inside natural phrases and sentences the way native speakers actually use them. Mistake number 3, focusing only on passive skills like reading and listening instead of active skills like speaking and writing. The fix: spend at least 30% of your study time actively producing English. Mistake number 4, translating from your native language instead of thinking directly in English. The fix: create an English immersion bubble in your daily life and practice narrating your thoughts in English. Mistake number 5, avoiding mistakes instead of embracing them as learning opportunities. The fix: give yourself permission to make mistakes proudly and see them as valuable feedback, not failures. These 5 shifts will transform your English learning from slow and frustrating to fast and effective. I promise you, if I had known these things 10 years ago, I would have reached fluency in 2 years instead of 10. You just learned the exact mistakes that cost me a decade of wasted effort. But knowing about these mistakes isn't enough. You have to actually change your approach starting today. Here's what I want you to do. Right now, leave a comment telling me which of these 5 mistakes you've been making and which one you're going to fix first. This simple act of commitment makes you way more likely to actually follow through. If this video opened your eyes to a better way of learning English, smash that like button and subscribe to this channel, because next week, I'm revealing the 3 pronunciation secrets that will make you sound 50% more natural in just 7 days. You don't want to miss that. And remember, you're not bad at English. You were just learning it the wrong way. Now you know better. Now you can do better. Now you can finally make the progress you've been chasing for years. 10 years of mistakes condensed into 25 minutes of insights. Don't waste another day. Start fixing these mistakes today. Your future fluent self is counting on you. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stop studying English and start using English. That's how you win. Let's make your English journey successful together.